You didn't plan to reject them one day. It wasn't some strategy or manipulation or game you were playing. It was exhaustion mixed with clarity, the kind that arrives quietly after you have begged, explained, waited, and hoped for far too long. You loved an avoidant, someone who came close only to pull away. Someone who wanted intimacy but panicked the moment it felt real. They loved you in fragments, in moments, in words that never turned into consistency. And for a long time you adjusted yourself to their fear. You softened your needs, you silenced your questions, you accepted crumbs and called them patience because you believed love meant understanding their wounds more than honoring your own. But something changed the day you stopped chasing. It wasn't dramatic. You didn't shout or threaten or cry. You simply paused. You didn't reply immediately. You didn't fix the silence. You didn't rush to reassure them. And that moment felt strange, almost wrong, because you were used to being the emotional glue, holding everything together. The avoidant noticed immediately, even if they didn't say it at first. Avoidants always notice distance. They feel it before they understand it, because distance triggers the very wound. They spend their lives running from abandonment, masked as independence. Your calm withdrawal confused them, because they were used to controlling the rhythm. Pull close, disappear, come back, when they felt safe. But now the rhythm changed. You were no longer dancing to their steps. You were standing still, and that terrified them more than any argument ever could. Days passed. And you didn't demand clarity. You didn't ask where you stood. You didn't send long emotional messages explaining your pain. You simply lived your life. And that silence became louder than all the words you had spoken before. In their mind, questions began to form. Why aren't they chasing? Why aren't they reacting? Did I go too far? Did I lose control? Avoidants rely on emotional distance to feel safe, but they also rely on your presence to feel chosen. When you removed yourself emotionally, you removed their safety net, and suddenly the space they once craved felt empty, not peaceful. They began checking their phone more often, rereading old messages, replaying moments where you had shown up for them unconditionally, moments they had taken for granted because they assumed you would always be there. Your rejection wasn't cruel, it was quiet, and that is what made it powerful, because it forced them to sit with themselves without distraction, without your reassurance, without your emotional labor. And that is when the panic starts, not because they suddenly became healed or emotionally available, because they felt the loss of control slipping away. You see, avoidants don't fear love, they fear losing autonomy. But what they fear even more is being rejected before they are ready to leave. And now you had done the unthinkable. You rejected them without asking for permission, without trying to change them, without begging them to stay. You chose yourself. And that choice challenged the core belief they never admit out loud, that they are unlovable. Once truly known. As days turned into weeks, they started testing the waters. Casual messages, random check-ins, memories disguised as jokes. They wanted to see if the door was still open, if you were still waiting, emotionally available on stand by. But you didn't bite, and every ignored bait, every neutral response deepened their anxiety, because now they were the one chasing clarity. Now they were the one feeling unsure. And this role reversal shook them deeply, because for the first time they felt what you had felt for months: uncertainty, longing, vulnerability, and the urge to reach out despite fear. The more grounded you became, the more unsettled they felt. They began idealizing you, not because you changed, but because distance creates reflection, and reflection creates regret. They remembered how safe they felt with you, how you understood them without trying to trap them, how you gave love without conditions. And suddenly that love felt rare, precious, irreplaceable. The irony is painful, because they could have valued it when they had it. But avoidants often need loss to recognize love. Your rejection wasn't punishment, it was consequence, and consequence is what awakens awareness late at night. When distractions faded, they felt it, the absence of your energy, the way you no longer centered them, the way your world no longer revolved around their moods. And in that quiet they began to miss you, not just the comfort, but the version of themselves they were with you, calmer, softer, more human. And that is when the shift truly happens, because now the avoidant is no longer running from intimacy, they are running toward the safety they once pushed away. And the more you remain detached, respectful, and firm in your self-worth, the more they feel the urge to close the gap, not with games, but with desperation, because you showed them something powerful, that love does not beg, love chooses. And when you chose yourself, you became the one thing they can't easily replace. Part 1 ends here, where the power has shifted, but the story is far from over, because when an avoidant realizes they are losing you, their next move will reveal everything about who they truly are, and whether their begging comes from fear or from real transformation. moment they realized you were not coming back the way you used to, something inside them cracked, because avoidants survive by believing they are the ones who leave first, the ones who detach before they get hurt. But now the script had flipped. You were gone, emotionally present, physically distant, mentally unavailable, and that absence forced them to face what they spend their lives avoiding: their own attachment, wounds, their fear of being seen, and their deep belief that if someone truly knows them, they will eventually leave. So when you did leave, without drama, without cruelty, without begging, it confirmed their worst fear and shattered their sense of control. They began replaying every interaction, searching for the exact moment they lost you, wondering if they waited too long, if they assumed too much, if they mistook your patience for weakness. Avoidants often believe love will wait forever because they confuse tolerance with loyalty, but your silence taught them something brutal: love that is not respected eventually withdraws. They started imagining you moving on, laughing without them, healing without them, choosing someone who could show up in ways they never did. And that image triggered panic, not because they wanted to own you, but because they finally understood what they had lost: someone who loved them without trying to cage them, someone who gave freedom without disappearing. And now that balance was gone, they reached out more boldly, this time not with casual check-ins, but with emotional urgency. Apologies surfaced, confessions followed suddenly. They were saying the words you had waited so long to hear: I miss you. I didn't realize what I had. I'm scared of losing you. But here is the truth they won't tell you: their begging is not proof of healing, it is proof of fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of regret, fear of being alone with themselves. And this is where your power truly lies, because if you rush back too quickly, the old dynamic will return. They will feel safe again, and safety for an unhealed avoidant often leads to emotional withdrawal once more. But if you remain grounded, calm, and selective, they are forced to confront a choice: change or lose you permanently. And that choice is terrifying, because change requires vulnerability, accountability, and consistency. The very things they have avoided their entire life. They will test you one last time, pulling back slightly to see if you chase, offering half effort to see if you accept crumbs again. And every time you don't react, every time you hold your boundary with kindness, you teach them a new rule: access to you requires emotional presence. This is when the begging intensifies, not always in words, but in actions, showing up more often, asking about your life, wanting reassurance, wanting proof that they still matter. And they do, but not at the cost of your self-respect. You see, the real transformation only begins if they are willing to sit with discomfort without running, if they can tolerate closeness without suffocating, if they can love without controlling distance. And many avoidants fail here because healing feels like losing identity, but some choose growth. And if they do, it is because your rejection forced them to face reality, not because you chased them into change. You became the mirror they could no longer avoid, and whether they rise to meet you or fall back into old patterns depends on one thing: your willingness to never abandon yourself again. Because the moment you chose yourself, you stopped being an option and became a standard. And that is what truly makes an avoidant beg, not the fear of losing you, but the realization that they must become better to deserve you. And part 2 ends here, at the moment where the avoidant stands at a crossroads. And in the next part, their final move will reveal whether their love is real or just another escape from their own pain. What happens next is the moment of truth, because when an avoidant feels they are truly about to lose you, they stop performing and reveal their core. Either they step forward into accountability, or they retreat into emotional shutdown. And you watch closely now, not with hope, but with clarity, because you are no longer attached to an outcome, you are attached to your self-respect. They may suddenly want deep conversations about the future, talk about commitment, consistency, and effort, promises you once begged for, offered freely now. But you are wiser, you listen for alignment, not intensity, because avoidance can sound convincing when fear is driving them. Intensity feels like change, but consistency is the real proof. They will say they are different, that they have reflected, that they finally understand your value, but understanding without sustained action is just another delay tactic. And this is where many people fail. They confuse emotional words with emotional availability. But you don't anymore. You watch how they show up when things are calm, not when they are afraid, because fear creates temporary effort, but safety reveals true character. As time passes, they either maintain that effort without being chased, or they begin to fade again, subtly, slowly, testing if you will lower your standards just this once. And when you don't, when you remain steady, kind, but unavailable to inconsistency, something shifts deeply within them. Because for the first time, they are not rewarded for avoidance. They are not punished. Either they are simply met with reality, and reality is uncomfortable for someone who has lived their life escaping feelings. They may become frustrated, accuse you of being cold, distant, changed. And in a way you have changed. You have learned that love without reciprocity is self-abandonment. And you will not do that again if they choose growth. This is where it starts, not in grand gestures, but in small repeated actions. Calling when they say they will, staying present during conflict, listening without shutting down, allowing intimacy without pulling away. It is slow, uncomfortable, and vulnerable, and many avoidants walk away at this stage because healing feels like standing naked emotionally without armor. But if they walk away this time, it doesn't break you because you are no longer invested in fixing them. You understand that rejection was never about controlling them. It was about protecting yourself, and if they choose to stay and grow, they will do so knowing that access to you is not guaranteed. It is earned through emotional safety, mutual effort, and respect. And that knowledge changes the dynamic permanently because now they know you can leave and you will be okay. And paradoxically, that is what creates real security, not fear, not chasing, not begging, but choice freely made on both sides. You no longer seek to be chosen, you choose. And that is the final shift, because whether they beg, whether they change, whether they leave, the outcome no longer defines your worth. You reclaimed your power the moment you rejected what did not honor you. And in doing so you stopped teaching people how to love you poorly, and started teaching yourself how to love you fully. And that is the ending they never expect, the one where you don't win them back. You win yourself.